Hi, you're with India Post Live, India's first online news conversation web TV. I'm Ishan Russell, and India Post Live is, of course, a forum where you can participate. Yes, IndiaPostLive.com is the name of the website. Just go there, log in, and post your comments to participate in this conversation. If you want to comment via social media, you can use Twitter, you can use Facebook. On Twitter, you can go to hashtag India Post Live, that's our hashtag, or use at India Post Live, that's our Twitter handle. Or on Facebook, you can just log in and post your comments on our page, and we'll surely incorporate those comments in our discussion over here. And you can also use any other format in case you want to come in via Skype or Google Hangout and really talk about a particular issue or talk to any of our experts over here. You're most welcome to do so. So please go ahead and join this conversation. All right, today the conversation is about an issue that has been there for some time now. We in India have been preoccupied with our elections to worry about the fate of 236 girls, schoolgirls, who've been kidnapped. Some of them have been threatened to be sold as sex slaves. This in Nigeria, in Africa. Yes, and the group that's done this is a terror group called Boko Haram. Who are they? What is this entire controversy? And where does India stand in all of this? And how is this going to affect geopolitics around the world? That is what we'll be discussing in our show today. So if you have a comment or a query about this, please do join in this conversation. I have with me in the studio Mr. Kamaraga. He's an observer in international affairs, has been consulting to many international affairs organizations, and has been an expert as far as international affairs are concerned, as far as India is concerned. Also, we'll be joined by Mr. Mubarak Haider. He is a renowned Pakistani scholar, has been observing Islamic traditions and Islamic politics across Asia and across the world, and he joins us live as well. And we'll also be joined by Vidya Venkat. She's the Media and Communications Officer at the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative and has been speaking about this issue for a very long time. I'll start with you, Vidya. Boko Haram, 236 girls gone missing, really doesn't figure in India's agenda right now. But how worried should the world be?
See, basically, the angle from where I enter into this debate is the angle of human rights violations in Nigeria. And if you remember, in 1995, Nigeria was suspended from the Commonwealth, from the Commonwealth of Nations, following serious violations of human rights and the murder of the political activist Ken Saro-Wiwa, and all those incidents had happened. So if you look at it from that point of view, I think the world needs to be concerned, because we are talking about, we know that we are living in an interconnected world now. I mean, it's not as though incidents happening in another part of the world are completely unrelated to what's happening in our country. I mean, if you look at the work of this terror organization, Boko Haram, which is said to be linked with Al Qaeda, definitely they seem to have some connections with global terror organizations. So I don't think people in India should just sit back and think that this is happening somewhere in Africa. It's got nothing to do with me. But in a increasingly globalized and interconnected world, I think these kind of incidents happening in another part of the world definitely have repercussions for our own country. And if it's happening in Nigeria today, it could happen in in Bombay or Delhi tomorrow. So so I think to answer your question, I would say that this is definitely of concern to India, and this is definitely of concern to the global community.
Right.
And in fact, several years later, Nigeria was reinstated into the Commonwealth, and they are, I mean, they are answerable under international law. So the global rights framework applies to them as much as it does to other countries. So it's very concerning that such an incident has actually happened.
All right, Kamar Sahib, but explain to us, what is Boko Haram and so where did they come from? Was it an organization that has been there for some time now and the world's not being paid any heed to it?
No, Boko Haram is in news for quite some time, at least last 10 years. And this is They are no different than Al-Qaeda or Taliban or whole lot of Lashkars which are, existing in Pakistan, Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jangvi. They are more or less same ideology. It is started 2002 by Muhammad Yusuf, a cleric, who is a Salafist, extremist, militant, they are fundamentalist organization, and wanted to establish, he wanted to, to establish Nigeria as Islamic state, like Taliban in Afghanistan, they wanted to establish a pure Islamic, Sunni Islamic state in Afghanistan. Similarly, they were also, then he started, and then gradually he was murdered, killed 2009, and the new leadership, it's not one group, there are a number of groups, like Taliban also, it's not a monolithic group, there are a number of groups, now it's led by what's his name, Abu Bakr Sheikhu. Abu Bakr, he's a very violent fighter. He was trained in Pakistan. He speaks Urdu. Can you believe it? So all these organizations, they are rooted in Pakistan, Afghanistan border area, where they have been received training, and then all of them, these jihadists have come from different countries to Pakistan, and from there they waged a war against Soviets in Afghanistan. Many stayed back. Then all these people went back to their respective countries, where they started their own organization, and Boko Haram is one of them. It's become very powerful organization. Powerful in the sense, you should also understand the Nigerian setup, of the country. This is in the north, where Muslim-dominated areas, they are very powerful. This is the area which remains very backward. Nigeria is not only, as she mentioned, the human rights violations are very frequent in her. It's also very corrupt administration. Right. Government corruption is very high. You won't believe, $20 billion from oil revenues were siphoned out, and they're still looking for it. It's unaccountable. $20 billion. In fact, many top officials were named, for this. Anyway, then the regime is very repressive. And this region, northern region, remained very backward. The Muslims are dominated, So repression, corruption, and
do they have popular support? Does Boko Haram have popular support?
Among the youth, because they have they don't look towards any other. Nothing has been done in that area. But it's not that, they don't have, like Taliban don't have much support in Afghanistan, 5,000 Taliban are enough to create havoc or destroy law and order in the whole of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and many other countries. Similarly, these people, a section of youth have joined them. They're very angry with the administration. They don't see any future. Not much development has taken place.
Right.
So these are the grievances. That's how these groups are sustaining. These. Now they are against Western education.
That is what I think Boko Haram actually means.
It's
against Western education.
It's not. It's all the fundamentalist organization. This is started. In 18th century, this type of movements emerged. In India, the Deoband movement, emerged. Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabi Salafi movement emerged. With the decline of the Ottoman Empire, they see that they believe that the empire was weakened or disintegrated later. Similarly, in India, the Deoband saw the Mughal disintegration of the Mughal empire is because they, diagnosed that the Muslims are losing to the Western world mainly because they have deviated from true path. So they believe if we go back to the true path, as existed during the time of 4 pious caliphs, So if we go back to that age, so only then we can progress. And they see that Western education is corrupting anyone. Not only Western, the Persian influence also. They are against all the foreign influence.
Other than their own.
they want to establish a pure tribal setup as it was existing at that time, and they look towards the Arabia. Not, they even see the Persians or see the Sufi movement, as also, they see these practices, or also many of their practices are Hindu. So they have attacked number of Sufi shrines in Pakistan, even in Chad, Mali, in that region, or Nigeria also, because this region Sufism is deep rooted.
Right.
It has gone from Turkey, has taken to that area. So they are against all foreign influence, and the Western education, they think it's a sin. So they should not study. They should study Arabic. They should wear Arab dresses. They should not have any other culture, joyless, cultureless Islam they want to establish, And
they'll go to any means, including kidnapping 236 school-going girls. I want to get in Mubarak here, because
I
he's
would like to listen to him also.
Point on this. Haider Saab, go ahead.
Yes, the point that you have raised is very well answered already by your friend here. Actually, lot of writings have already been done on this issue. Very correct. The basic ideology is alienation from modern civilization. And as I have repeatedly said, the basic misunderstanding which was created among Muslims all over the world was not because of ignorance, it was because of politics. After the fall of the Ottoman Empire, the Saudi Empire rose, they started thinking they can restore economy by preaching the Arab culture. In fact, it's a civilizational narcissism psychology which makes all over the world, Muslims all over the world ready for manipulation. That pride and is constantly being instilled among Muslims to compensate their backwardness in the modern world, gives them the opportunity to manipulate Muslims for violence. Sometimes you see, it is very strange, the deep resemblance between militant groups makes some thinkers believe that they are perhaps part of Al-Qaeda. But then others, Muhammad Yusuf's movement in Nigeria was part of Al-Qaeda. Many people do this. But the question, how do they resemble so? It is, the basic reason is that all of them, they belong to one sensibility. The sensibility is hatred of the modern people, because they label it as the enemy of Muslims, modern civilization. And they have openly narrated that there is a relationship. It's the continuation of the crusades, medieval crusades of the Christians against the Muslims. That these crusades are continuing, and they have appeared to the modern world with a new ideology but they are the Crusaders. They have come only in the world to destroy Muslim supremacy.
All right.
Muslims have ruled for 700 years, and this could be easily given to the government to believe that this modern civilization is against Muslims. So wherever they rise and revolt, they resemble each other. Because Salafi, as we call them, Salafi means the worshippers are followers of ancestors. And they believe that the only Salaf are the ancestors of the Arabs of the first century, as Qutb calls them, Quranic generation. That first Quranic generation is our servant, our ancestors. And anywhere Muslims belong to that even if they are any convert to Islam, they will come and the charity of those Islam, those ancestors.
Right.
And therefore, everywhere there is Buddhist psychology then. And they see women's education and emancipate. That's most important point. Makes the Muslims all about who are Muslims are marriage with the world because these powerful elements start interpreting in their own way.
Right.
That they do not believe in human education and emancipation.
All right, but Aga Sahab, as far as the support that they get, you said that the youth, obviously, because they have nothing better to do, a complete lack of opportunities, lack of education, they have found support. Do we see this spreading across perhaps Africa and spilling over into Asia or even other parts of the world?
No, it's already gone, you know. If you look at Africa, North Africa, right from Egypt and the entire, you know, up to Morocco, then Central Africa, and now West Africa. Nigeria, its neighbor Cameroon, Chad, Benin, Niger, and up to Mali, you know, Sahel region, the entire Sahel region, you know, it's like, see what was happened with the fall of Gaddafi's regime. These militants have got hold of lots of weapon, money, and a place for training from two places. Libya, they got weapon and money, and a Shabab, which is in Somalia, you know. The failed, all these states are failed states, you know, all of them which I've listed, you know, most of them, you know, right from Pakistan to Mali, you would find these regimes are failing, you know, and as a result, militancy is growing, you know, in these. So, Somalia, they have Al-Shabaab. Now, very smart move by Al-Qaeda to establish Al-Qaeda in Maghrib, they call it, you know, which is a link organization connecting with all of these. So they got a place for training in Somalia, and now they have money, they have weapons, which is coming from Libya, going up to the Syria, Mali, you know, where all these things happen. So there are two types, you know. These are French-speaking nations, except Nigeria, rest Mali, Chad, Benin, all of them.
Former French colony.
Former French colony. And this is the region, it's a very rich in minerals. Nigeria is the, I think, leading oil producer of Africa. Then you have oil, you have gas. Mali has uranium and other minerals, you know. So all these, you know, the French companies, you know, takes from there, you know, the French power, nuclear power, for that, you know, uranium goes from this region. So it's a very rich nation. People are so poor and backward, you can't imagine.
All right, so then at the end of the day, and I want to put this question to Vidya also, because 150 Nigerian boarding school boys were doused, burnt alive by the Boko Haram. Right now, we are seeing outrage over 256 girls. I'm not comparing the two by any measure, but the fact is the world has just woken up. In fact, while you answer this question, I would like my producer to play out the kind of tweets that have been happening around, from Barack Obama to Michelle Obama to everybody has been tweeting about this, has been talking about this. And the leader of the Boko Haram is also on Twitter, and he's quite happy about this, saying that, yes, my organization is getting really popular. So Vidya, at the end of the day, what is the solution? I mean, as far as education is concerned, I mean, perhaps it's time that countries like France, or other countries who are really exploiting, or not exploiting, even reaping the benefits out of their former colonies, do really take a stand and do really provide the benefits that they are extracting out of these countries to their own citizens.
First of all, a slight correction. I think it is 284 girls.
All right, sorry.
56, 284. And I would in fact say that the kind of attention this issue is getting, I think it's part of the Malala effect. Because you have Malala, the story of the Pakistani girl who was attacked by the Taliban, became very popular in Western media, and I think because this is also like young schoolgirls who got abducted, so the media has its own way of picking up stories. Somehow young girls getting abducted by a militant group. It sort of fits into the whole Malala story framework. So I think that could be one reason why the Western media has picked it up in such a big way. But I would say that you are right in saying that this one event has sort of captured the imagination of the Western world, and civil society is now responding to it. But one thing that we need to bring into this debate is that this abduction is part of a larger struggle happening down there. I mean, the conflict, between the rebel groups and the military in this country has been going on for a very long time. And in fact, I just wanted to quote a short extract, if you allow me to,
Go ahead.
A report that CHRI has brought out in 2010. Called Easier Said and Done, and in fact we monitor the human rights situation in different Commonwealth countries, and in fact there are clear references in that report to extrajudicial killings by the police, by the military in Nigeria, and many of the Boko Haram. So I would just like to quote from that because it's relevant in the context of this question that you are asking me. That in Borno State, the alleged leader of Boko Haram was blamed for an outbreak of violence for over several days, and in fact he was arrested the same month and he was killed by the police while in custody in an unmistakable and well-publicized instance of extrajudicial killing. And in fact, there are several cases like this in which there have been open extrajudicial killings and torture by the security forces. So this shouldn't end up becoming like a one-sided debate, in which we are just vilifying the Boko Haram group, but not addressing the larger. It's a kind of a chain. It's a cycle of violence. And these girls who have got abducted are mere pawns in this, entire game. So if you're talking of solutions, then we need to move ahead. We need to move on from making.
All right, we just have about 5 minutes left, so let's start talking about possible solutions. What would come to your mind?
We have to go beyond tokenism. It's all nice to have hashtag bring back our girls and keep tweeting about it, but is that really making a difference on the ground? That's a question that we have to ask. So the moment we ask that question, we can think about possible solutions, and I think possible solutions should be about engaging with the militants. I think the moment we start casting this debate into us and them, then you are immediately alienating the people who are indulging in this kind of behavior, and a military solution perhaps will only lead to escalation of violence on the ground. I remember I got this email from the global, the global call to action against poverty group, a civil society group based in Africa, which sent me an email saying that we need to the forces of the Nigerian military should bring our girls back, and we keep talking about more and more military-based solutions to addressing this violence, but I think one has to focus on development as well. As the professor on the show said that there is poverty and there is the young men do not have anything meaningful to engage in their country, and that is why militancy is attractive for them. So I think the root cause has to be addressed, and not just calling for military solutions or these tokenistic gestures of tweeting, and it just gets groups like these who really thrive on attention. It just helps them to boost their presence. As you rightly said, that Boko Haram is happy to get so much attention over Twitter and stuff like that. That's not what we really want. What we want is that you have to address the local issues there. What is encouraging the youth to join these groups?
All right. Fair enough, and that is a very important point you raise, and I want to go across to Mr. Mubarak Haider because in Pakistan, and in neighboring Afghanistan, from there we've seen what the American mistakes of the American foreign policy of the 80s managed to do in the 2000s, even to America and even to the Western world, and now they're recontemplating. But exactly in Africa, this is the same thing that perhaps what France has been doing for some time now. The exploitation of natural resources, the muscle flexing that goes on between the big superpowers, and in the middle are crushed locals from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Nigeria, anywhere else in the world. And the 284 schoolgirls, 86 schoolgirls, I'm not really sure of that figure right now, but they might have become the focal point. But the issue is much larger, isn't that, Mr. Haider?
I believe it is very important to disagree with Vidya because this is exactly the argument that they have been advancing everywhere. Instead of addressing the economic and other issues, you run against us. We are the rebels. We want justice for people. There is no justice, there is no development, so we are rebels. This is the argument that they have. But the question is, I in Pakistan and in Arab countries, I have met people who are very prosperous middle class traders who finance these organizations and who send even now they are sending their sons to fight for them. And Americans, very prosperous Americans come and join Al-Qaeda and go terrorist and die for it and go to jails for it and to concentration camps they have gone for this cause. The question is, how can we mistake the ideological aspect of this worldwide organization, this movement, and externalize the whole issue onto the question of development? If prosperity were the answer, then the prosperous middle class in Pakistan would not support Al-Qaeda.
So why are they then why are they supporting them?
This is absence of democracy. That is one of the reasons, I believe, because of underdevelopment, absence of democracy, strong army regime. Why they are not, sustaining in a democratic setup? They don't, because they have other alternative sources, where they can come up, and protest and all these things allowed. But if you look right from Pakistan to Morocco, you don't find democracy. So these are the breeding ground, because they have genuine
Is that the reason, Mr. Haider? Is that the reason?
No. If that were the reason, I would like to be enlightened on the question why the well-to-do Muslims not only in Pakistan but in the European countries where they have emigrated to find prosperity, and they have found prosperity. They lived in England, for example, very good lives, and there they are asking for Sharia, imposition of Sharia. Can we explain this where democracy allows them to go on streets and condemn the democracy of France and condemn the system of England and of Norway and Holland, everywhere, and they can openly, they have all the rights in America and everywhere to build mosques, to go in democracy, to even ask for Sharia and go to the courts, and the societies not only tolerate them, they even support them, and they say, well, this is their thinking, this is their point of view, we have to accommodate their point of view. In such liberal and accommodating societies, and then come to India. You will see the fallacy of your thinking in the days to come. And even in a democratic country like India, maybe India is not so democratic as the as France is, but how can they come? How can they go on the streets against the French government, asking for their right of hijab, and ask for Sharia courts in America where they have all the freedom? I have
Sir,
seen
but that's where the difference is. That's where the difference is. I think that's where the difference is of the fact that you can protest, you can ask for anything as long as you're not using undemocratic methods.
That is true. You know, a section, yes, few Americans or few European from your youth.
I mean, there are enough in India, lunatics in India who would want a complete...
Then second thing, you know, Europe have a different problem, you know, because of racism also, many of them have joined this type of movement, you know. They think that the true Islam will come, you know. It's a movement which has spread, but in democratic setup, they are not thriving. You would find these type of voices comes up, you know, in Europe or America or in India also, maybe some places, you know, but not much. And you know what happens, you know, one can contain it, you know, because we have newspapers, we have public, meetings where one can go, and masjids, you can go there and, you know, come out, bend out, you know, the temple. But what happened in these societies, you know, in these societies they don't have access to the liberal elements, don't have any access, you know, or they don't have any organizations, they don't have any institutions in these countries. Look what has happened in Egypt. Egypt, you know, the very powerful movement has emerged, and they wanted the large majority
and they just can't decide on what they want.
The movement was hijacked by militants, you know. Militants are not in more in numbers, you know. In most of the Islamic countries, majority is liberal, you know. Most of the countries you would find liberals. The problem is they are not back. If you look at the regime in these countries, these are army-backed regimes.
All right.
And none of them tolerate democracy or democratic institutions or anything, you know. They say the democracy is alien. It's a Western concept.
All right, so basically, just to bring it down to one line, you're saying that democracy perhaps is one of the solutions, or at least if everybody finds their voice, then at least there's vent out to an anger.
The second thing, you know, in a democratic setup, the government are answerable to the people.
All right.
So they have to do something for the people, you know. Development takes place, you know. Every 5 years you have to go to the people and take mandate from them, you know. So that's why there is a difference, you know. You would find groups. You still find some groups, you know.
Yeah, I mean, there are more than enough across India, Mr. Mubarak.
Mubarak is right, you know, but
I would like to respond to Ms.
Quickly, Vidya, we've absolutely run out of time. Is the final comment that I'll give to you, and also one to Mubarak sir before I close this argument.
That I want to make is with regards to the Nigerian government's response. I mean, the government has initiated many counter-insurgency operations to stamp out the Boko Haram, and which have resulted in massacres of civilians in villages in Borno state. And many of these have been revenge attacks for the deaths of soldiers. And in fact, in April 2013, in the village of Baga, about 200 civilians were killed, and it was a very brutal incident. And the reason why I want to point this out is because, I mean, Mr. Haider might be justified in his critique of this whole logic that the rebel groups use. But then what happens is that this kind of criticism allows the government to justify very brutal counter-insurgency operations, which results in death of ordinary civilians, and that only increases the appeal.
All right, so it's just a vicious cycle. It's a vicious cycle that starts. Right, Mr. Mubarak, other final comments to you before I close this.
I agree that these are important, the developments are necessary, democracy is necessary, but these are the products of a certain human resource development. We have to understand that societies are built, again I repeat what I said once, societies are built by thinkers and visionaries and by the human resource. When we speak of democracy, it is the cart, not the horse. The horse is the human thinking, which creates democracy. Democracy does not create intellectual awakening or the human resource. Human resource creates democracy and establishes it and promotes it and cements it. And development is also the result of it. I insist again, the, the ideology that creates this type of terrorism and this kind of violence has its roots in basic theory and thinking. That ideology has to be challenged. I repeat, it has to be challenged on international level, like we challenged the modern world, as proudly says, we challenged Soviet extremism and communism, and we were able to overthrow it by ideological war. Well, if that is true, I don't know how far it is true, or we have to, it's ifs and buts. But the issue is as hard as it was in the Cold War. We have to engage in an ideological struggle against the narcissistic concepts which are spread among Muslims, because this may be my personal thinking, but I have to say, I believe that as long as Muslim aspiration to world power remains on the scene, all dormant religions will become violent one by one. As you are already looking at your own scene in India, this is the product. The Hindu, soft Hindu is becoming violent and will become more violent as Muslim aspiration for world power increases. Muslims are, I'm a Muslim, I talk on behalf of Muslims. We have been so tutored that we do not believe others are equal. We, even in our miserable
Mr. Haider,
backwardness.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I'll just, if you have one more line to add to that, I'm sorry, we've absolutely run out of time. So if you have one more line to add to that, what you were saying, just to conclude.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
No, I was just saying we've absolutely run out of time. So in case you wanted to conclude that with one more line, if you wanted to add. But I get the point that you're making, that it has to be a lot of inward thinking, and it's a very critical, the last line that you mentioned about the Muslim aspiration for world power, and that is what groups like Boko Haram have been obviously preaching, and so has the Al-Qaeda have been preaching, that they've been kept out and the world's been taken over, and that is that aspiration aspect from the Ottoman Empire to the Mughal Empire. I mean, we see that resonate across the world, and that is perhaps why we're in this situation, and that's a whole other argument I think we can both have at another time, but I'll give the final word to Kamaraga and just close this discussion because we're already
No, I just wanted to tell Vidya, we in India are equally concerned with the abduction of so many girls, and we know these groups very well, because they are operating in Kashmir also, and they have destroyed hundreds of schools in Kashmir, right from that whole region. If you look, Jammu and Kashmir, not one, hundreds of schools were destroyed, and so many forced marriages, have taken place in Kashmir, where the militants have come from across the border and forced the families, where they have taken shelter or entered into the house, married to the local girls, and then left them, make them pregnant and left them there, So we know and Vidya, I would like to tell you, it is very difficult to negotiate these people, because these are the people, it's like, you're negotiating with the Nazis. So they are so strong in their ideology, which they believe, and the jihad religion is a very powerful force, and they're extremely motivated by this force. So many Americans have tried to negotiate with Taliban. Taliban, and nothing come up.
Yeah, negotiation.
So we have to deal firmly with them. It's not only negotiation, but you have to deal your.
All right, not just negotiation, also a battle of ideas, as Mr. Mubarak said. Vidya, we've absolutely run out of time. I would request you to tweet out your response for sure, because we'll we'll continue this conversation on Twitter and other social media forums. Thank you very much, Mr. Mubarak Haider and Vidya, for joining us. Vidya, we've absolutely run out of time on this one, but for sure on Twitter, you tweet out your response. I'll make sure that the people who are watching the show hear it. And thank you, Mr. Kamaraga, for joining us in the show. Well, that's all the time we have right now, but very important issues raised about ideas, about what ideas are religions and religious leaders propagating. Are those leading us to the situation? Is democracy the solution to everything, as has often been sold? Well, that really is not the case. But at the end of the day, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, as the Mahatma said. So on that note, we'll wrap up this conversation. Thanks so much for joining in.